Wow, that was fast. I figured that was a typo for mate. Hmm. I don't know what's going on here. Ooh, excuse me. How are things? So what are you doing? Just more texturing. I don't like where I'm at with this. I think that I need to... Not that. I think that I need to get in with these courses and actually go through them. Like, I think this one is probably the one that I should probably look at. I took a look at this one and I'm really upset with this one. And the reason I'm really upset with this one is because they don't teach Substance Painter. They predominantly teach 3D Code. But I didn't realize that when I bought it. So I'm kind of upset about that. This one is, I think this one uses Substance Painter. Or this might use Blender? I don't know. It's a bit poopy, but whatever. This one here is another one. This one uses a lot of... This one uses Substance Painter, but I think this one uses some older stuff in Substance Painter that is no longer available. It also is a little bit awkward because, like, you have to I can't share with you guys walking through it, so that kind of sucks Because most of the time I would rather, like, if I'm going to do something like this, I'd rather it be shared with you than not, right? So. Interesting. So I think that I'm gonna try Blender today. Like actually try Blender. Um so there's that one. Do I just do the donut tutorial?
This is blank.
Like we could just do the Blender tutorial. Let's do that. We'll do Blender tutorial.
Blender. Open source 3D software that can be used to make animations, visual effects, game assets, or practically anything 3D. And best of all, it's 100% free and it always will be. If you've never used it before but you want to learn it, well, then you're in the right place. This is a tutorial for complete beginners. I've been using Blender for 20 years, so I'm going to show you how to use all of its core features. And by the end, you'll finish with not only the confidence to start your own projects, but with your very own donut animation. And I know this looks complex, but I promise you it's achievable for a complete beginner. And I say that with confidence because many already have. This is actually the fourth version of this tutorial. I made the first donut tutorial back in 2016, and I've been remaking it every few years to keep up with Blender's development. In that time, millions of people, just like yourself, have gone from having never used 3D to successfully making their own donuts. One artist even snuck his into a little film called Everything Everywhere All at Once. Very clever. So if you're ready to take your first steps in 3D, hit the subscribe button and let's begin. First, go to blender.org/download or just click the link in the description. Then, obviously, you gotta hit the big download button. Once downloaded on Windows, double click it and then just go through the install steps. But if you're on a Mac, just drag it into the applications folder. Then just find the Blender shortcut and open it. Then once it's open, just click anywhere off the splash screen to close it, and welcome to the wonderful world of 3D. First tip, do not get overwhelmed. If you go clicking around, you might find lots of buttons and some of them with very scary names, and it can all get very overwhelming very quickly. The thing you need to know is Blender can do a lot of things, which means it has a lot of tools, but you don't need to know every tool in order to do what you want to do. If you're familiar with the 80-20 rule, there's really only 20% of Blender's features that you end up using 80% of the time. And that's what I'm planning to teach you in this tutorial series. So stay with me and you should
Sweet. Hopefully he'll cover exactly what I need.
be fine. We'll start making the donut in the next video. In this one, we're just going to look at the interface, and I'm going to show you some of the basic navigation. So for starters, this view, this window right here, is your 3D viewport, and it's where you'll spend probably 90% of your time, because it is the 3D world. So you can see that we have three objects here. We've got a camera, we've got a cube, and we've got a lamp. And when we click on it, you can see it's selected because it has the yellow outline. So let's delete the default cube, of course, and replace it with something else. So we can do that by going up to the add menu up here, or by remembering the hotkey, which is Shift A. So Shift A for add. So usually the one you're looking for is underneath mesh. So these are called your primitives, and it's what you use to start something when you're looking to make an object. Like if you're going to make a chair, you might start with a cylinder as the chair leg and then build out from there. But the one I'm sure you're all very curious, you want to click it, it's the monkey. So let's just click the monkey. Why does Blender have a monkey? Well, fun fact, every 3D software has its own little I'm showing it out world. So you can see that we have three objects here. We've got a camera, we've got a cube, and we've got a lamp. And when we click on it, you can see it's selected because it has the yellow outline. So let's delete the default cube, of course, and replace it with something else. So we can do that by going up to the add menu up here, or by remembering the hotkey, which is Shift.
How do I recenter this thing? God damn it, I keep hitting space. What is it? It's shift space? No. No. There's that. That. Okay, there we go. We're gonna do this. Don't save. Because I wanted to resend that. Okay, so we're deleting this.
Shift A. So Shift A for add. So usually the one you're looking for is underneath mesh. So these are called your primitives, and it's what you use to start something when you're looking to make an object. Like if you're going to make a chair, you might start with a cylinder as the chair leg and then build out from there. But the one I'm sure you're all very curious, you want to click it, it's the monkey. So let's just click the monkey. Why does Blender have a monkey? Well, fun fact, every 3D software has its own little random complex object because it's useful to test things like shaders or complexities of scenes. So 3ds Max has the Utah teapot, Houdini has the toy, and I think Pig's head. Blender has the monkey, and it's actually called the Suzanne monkey head, which you can see in the top.
This is somewhat true. So there's a couple Houdini ones that that they have that are all very interesting and fun to play with. But because of how much Houdini has in it and how many different things it can be used for, Houdini has a couple different default meshes that you can use. This is just one of the least weird looking ones. I'll show you the Houdini ones. The Houdini ones are kind of cool. There's I think 3 in total. There might be 4. Well, did I open 2 versions of Houdini? I did. Silly me. So we've got the regulars. But we want to go to meshes. What is it there? Houdini default. Okay, where is box located? No. Fuck. Okay, here we go. Here's all of them. They're in here somewhere. Cause there's like this big guy and there's a pig head. But oh look, they have texturing stuff. I wonder what this is. Oh, here we go, geometry. That's what, oh, it's test geometry. That's what it is. So there's the pig head. We have this guy. There's Craig. Electra. There's a squid. I think I've seen that in a game. There's our man. Oops. The rubber toy. the ball. A template body. A head. A person. These are actual people at the company, I think. So, but yeah, like the test geometry here is great. They have so much different test geometry. So yeah, that's Houdini's test geometry. Everybody kind of uses the rubber toy or the picket. They're the most common ones, I think. The army looking dude, the buff guy, he gets used in a couple different tutorials and stuff like that. So you see him every now and then.
Left there, named after the orangutan from the film Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back. Random piece of trivia. So let's get a better look at it. And to that we need to orbit, which you can do by on your mouse there, your scroll wheel. That is called your middle mouse button. If you push that in and then drag around, that is now orbiting. Now, for my laptop users, you just panicked because you realize you don't have a mouse. How are you going to orbit around? First of all, probably a good idea to get a mouse for 3D work. It will come in handy. But in a pinch, you can get by without it just by up here in the top right-hand corner, this little gray circle, anywhere in the gray section. If you just left-click, drag on that, that will do the exact same thing. Or if you want, you can go to Edit Preferences, and then underneath Input, there's Emulate 3-button mouse. And that means that if you hold down Alt and then left-click, drag, that will do fine. That you make it nice and big so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so that's orbiting around with the middle mouse button. If you want to zoom in, we can do that just by scrolling in and out. Down Control and the middle mouse button, and that will do a smooth zoom as well. Okay, now is called viewport shading. And it's kind of a lightweight option, right? Just kind of got this flat, bland gray lighting over everything, and that's zoom as well. Okay, so one thing you might notice looking at this is that it's not very pretty, right? Just kind of got this flat, bland gray lighting over everything, and that's because this state right now is called viewport shading. And it's kind of a light.
I kind of see it, maybe. But keep in mind that there's a little bit of that's probably coming because there's probably a little bit of a delay between his speech and the camera. So if there's a bit of a delay there, then it will look like something's a little off, and that's where you're probably getting the that from. Also, sup Hagel. Outside working? All right. I'll yell if I need you.
Lightweight optimized way to view the scene.
I'm learning Blender today because I don't really want to do much since tomorrow I'm going on holiday.
Just as you're building it. But if you want to create a final pretty image, that's called rendering. And you can actually switch into rendered mode by going up here into the top right-hand corner. You can see we're currently in the viewport shading mode. If we go 2 across, you should see rendered view mode. So if we click that, your computer might stall for a quick second whilst it loads it in. You can see it's now different. We have directional light. We have shadow cast across the monkey. So it's now currently being lit by this lamp up here. So if I wanted to zoom in on that lamp there and just kind of like move it around, you can see it's kind of hard to focus on. It's always exactly not in
Thought it was because he was an aging Australian trying to compensate for his waning youth with a young haircut. I don't know. God damn it.
the right view. And that's because we are centered on our monkey right now. We need to change the focus. We need to pan to something else. So we could do that one of two ways. One, if you're on a laptop, you could use a little move tool there. That will do that. Or everyone else, shift, middle mouse click, drag. That will do the same thing. So middle mouse is for orbiting. Shift middle mouse is for pan to change your view to something else. Okay, so I want to move my light because it's too moody. I want to be able to see the monkey's face there. So to move an object, you could do it one of two ways. One, you could go over to the left-hand corner here and you've got the move tool. When you click that, you can see that the selected object, the lamp, has this this gizmo, it's called, with these axes on it. And if I just clicked and dragged on any of those arrows there, you can see I can move it along any of those. those axes. I can also just click on that white circle there, and that will just freehand drag it depending on my view. But it's kind of tedious. Every time you want to move something, you have to like go to that tool and then find the arrows and yada yada. So actually, most people in Blender prefer to use the hotkey. So we just keep it in the default selection state here, and instead remember the hotkey, which is G for grab. Now I just tapped the key, and you'll notice as I'm
Wait a second. Oh, that is not what I wanted at all.
move my cursor, that it's now attached to my cursor. It's not, my cursor isn't even actually close to it. In fact, my cursor could be on the other side of the screen, and I could tap G, and it will move it. And at first, this is kind of awkward. You're like, why is it working this way? But once you get used to it, you realize it's actually handy because you don't have to spend all this time like navigating your cursor to something just so that you can move it. Your cursor could be over here, and then just tap it, and you're moving it. So whilst you're in this move state, if you want to cancel a movement, you can do it one of two ways. You could just hit escape.
And here I thought it was because... Wait. Also, you're learning Blender at a wonderful time. They crammed a bunch of new stuff into 4.2 LTS without adequate design time, and now they're stuck supporting it for 2 years. So good.
Or you can right click. Then if you want to confirm a movement, like say I want to move my lamp here and I like the movement, I can just do a single left click. So again, if I want to cancel something, just right click. If I want to confirm the movement, left click. But let's say I wanted to move it along an axis. Like, I like these arrows here and I want to be able to move it on just a specific axis. Well, I can do that whilst I'm in that grab state as well. So after I've hit the G key to grab it, I can then tap the letter of the axis that I want to move it on. So if you don't know, in the real world and in the 3D software, there are 3 axes because there's 3 dimensions. There's the X axis, which I can...
That's a lie. That's a lie. Technically, it doesn't need to be X, Y, or Z. It can be whatever the fuck you want it to be. You should probably stick with X, Y, and Z, though.
I can move by hitting the X key. The
Also, sup, Zach. How are things?
Y axis to move it back and forth along the Y axis with the Y key, or the Z axis to move it up and down on the Z axis. So you can remember those letters, the X, Y, and Z.
That's actually kind of handy. I think that actually solves all of my problems there. That's interesting. Oops. Okay. Interesting. Fire sessions being fire session, highs around 30. Fire season being fire season, highs around 32, and ash on the windowsill still. So, ugh. Wait, was there a really bad fire down there? We've been pretty lucky in Canada. We haven't really had any fires affect us this year so far, which I'm kind of happy about.
Or the method that I actually prefer to use is whilst you're in that G state, if you just hold down the middle mouse button and then pull out, you can see you get this like gray line that pulls out from the center. And then if you just drag out and move around, it will snap it to the nearest axis. Which again is maybe an odd way to work, but it's actually really handy because it means you don't have to think of the letter and locate it on your keyboard. I can just tap G to move it and then middle mouse drag out and then just find that exact axis that I'm looking for. And so it's very fast to just quickly move the lamp exactly where I want.
Okay, so G, wait. There we go. This is going to take some getting used to. Oh, I see how that works. Okay.
By the way, if you're finding it hard to remember all of the keyboard shortcuts that I mentioned, I've actually put together a PDF, a cheat sheet of Blender's most common hotkeys, and you can download that by clicking the link in the description, so you can print it out, or you could just have it on a separate monitor while you work. Also, if you are from another 3D software package, you might notice that Blender's hotkeys are different than what you are used to. So if you actually go to Preferences, just for those people that are from other softwares, if you change the key map to industry compatible, you'll find that these shortcuts are probably more in line with what you remember from other software. I'll also put a link to a cheat sheet that is just for the industry compatible key maps that somebody else put together. I've got nothing to do with it, but I'll put that link there so you can check it out as well. For the rest of this tutorial series, I'm going to use Blender's hotkeys. Just keep that in mind. And let's say, as I am moving around here, I'm like, oh, this looks really good. I've got some nice Rembrandt lighting across the monkey's face. I want to take a photo. I want to take a nice, pretty image of this and post it on socials for clout, right? Well, I could take a screenshot of it, but that would be silly because it's got all these lines.
We have around 70 active ones at the moment. Something like 65,000 acres altogether. Not too bad. Still, holy shit. 70 active fires.
All over. It's all noisy, right? We don't like it. The way you take a photo, a pretty image in Blender, is to do a render. So you can do that one of two ways, by going up to render and hitting render image, or remembering the hotkey which says next to it F12. So when you do that, a little window will pop up. It will use your CPU or GPU, depending on which render you've got active, and it will render out a pretty image. And from here, you could go image and then save as, and it'll save it as a PNG or whatever, wherever you want to save it. But you might notice looking at this that this is actually a different view than what we have here, right? So here I've got a nice view of the monkey's face, but there is a different view. And the reason for that is when you do a render, it's not rendering from the view that you're looking at currently. It's always going to render from the point of view of the camera. So this is our camera over here, and it's looking from this angle. And we can actually look through the camera by just clicking the little camera icon there, or by remembering the hotkey, which is number pad 0. So how do we move the camera? Well, Blender's a little maybe a little different to other software packages, but you're supposed to like hit G to move it, and then like middle mouse to zoom in and out. And if you want to like move along an axis, I guess G and then X. You could do that, but actually what a lot of users prefer, especially those from other software packages, is if you've got your camera selected, which by the way I haven't mentioned this, but up here this is your outliner. It's kind of an inventory of every item that you've got in your scene. Okay, so with the camera there selected, if I hit N, N is to bring up the properties, N for properties for whatever reason, and then go to View. There's a little box there that just
Did you say M for properties? Or N for properties? N for properties, okay. Much better. Wait, what?
just says lock to camera to view. So now with that active, if I just use the same keyboard shortcuts as before, middle mouse button to orbit around, shift middle mouse.
Wait, where did he do
Drag
that?
camera to view. So now is for whatever that you've got in your scene. Okay, so with the camera there selected, if I hit N, N is to bring up the properties, N for properties for whatever reason, and then go to view. There's a little box there that
Okay. You say F3, right? Fucking half the battle here is just for fucking figuring out how to move. Said F3? Ah, okay. Do the thing.
that just says lock to camera to view. So now with that active, if I just use the same keyboard shortcuts as before, middle mouse button to orbit around, shift middle mouse to drag it, you can see that the camera is moving with it. So essentially the view, I can set it up exactly as I want, then hit N again, and then I can disable that. And then now as I pull out, you can see the camera will stay exactly where it was, and I can do a lovely, pretty render. But this is too simple. If we post this on the internet, people are bound to make fun of us. Imagine that. Well, we could give it some color, right? So with our monkey head selected, we can go over to here to the properties. So this property section is where you might spend the other, I don't know, another 5 to 8%, I'm not getting too exact there. You might spend another 5% of your time in this section, but it's where all of the properties for things are in Blender. So for example, you've got like the render properties, like the size of the image that you're saving something as is defined there. And some of these properties will stay here no matter what is selected, but others are selection dependent. So you can see actually if I click the camera there, you can see I get a little camera tab at the bottom there. But if I select my monkey, you'll see the camera tab disappears. But instead I have some other ones that appear. So one that we might want to change is underneath material. And this will enable us to add a material, change the color to something else, essentially. So underneath here where it's got new, I'm just going to hit new. And then you've got a bunch of options, very confusing. Ooh, IOR, subsurface. Again, don't worry about it. We'll get up to all that later on. The one that defines the color is the base color. So if I do a single left click on that white box there, I can then change this color to whatever I want. I could make it an odd, creepy, skin-toned monkey head, right? Like that, and do a render. Okay, so hey, all right, it's better, but still it's too simple. I think people will think we haven't put enough effort into this masterpiece. So let's add another object. Let's give the monkey a hat. So
Yeah. Wait, why do you ask? Is it because I'm tired? Is it because I'm streaming at an odd hour?
quickly want to add another object, how do we do it? Well, we could go to the add menu, like I mentioned before, or the hotkey Shift A. So what sort of hat do we want to add? We could do a boxy hat. Let's do a party hat with a cone. So once we've added that object, you can see it's just plopped it straight in the center, intersecting our monkey. So we need to move it.
Oh, that's because I'm totally burnt out. I'm on vacation today. This is the first day of vacation. I'm flying out tomorrow. I took today off so I could just tidy up and whatnot and pack for my vacation. But yeah, no, I'm 100% burnt out. I am exhausted, like all the time.
We can move it, we could grab it with the G key, so it's now moving it just on our cursor there. I don't want to move it just freehand though, because I like the position, but I just want to move it up. So I'm going to hit Z to move it along the Z axis. Right, I like it there, so once I like the placement, I'm just going to do a single left click. Okay, great.
I appreciate you checking in.
See, need to learn another tool, which is scale. So we can go to the scale tool there, and then we get this familiar little axis there. But again, most people prefer to remember the hotkey, which for scale is just S. So S to scale. So resizing that. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's move it down again. So G and Z. Okay. All right. But yeah, let's say we want to make it a little taller. Okay, so we could scale it along just the Z axis. So S and then Z. Whoops. S, Z. There we go. And it's now making it a tall party hat. Scale it down. There we go. Ha, look at that. A very bland party effect gray. Let's give it another material. An exciting color. A vibrant aqua color. Why not? Give that a render by hitting F12. Okay. Camera is in the wrong position. So let's go to camera view mode with number pad 0. I'm going to select my
I like to pack a tiny roll of Gorilla Tape and $20 bill in my drop kit just in case shit happens. That's fair. I don't think anything's gonna happen. We're flying to a city. We're just gonna be chilling in a city, wandering around, visiting some family.
camera, and rather than dabbling with that little thing I had before, I'm gonna hit G, and then middle mouse, just tap it once. As I said, it's a little awkward, Blender's the way it handles with the camera, but anyway, just move that out, and then I gotta rotate it. All right, so I'm gonna rotate with the camera selected, tap R, then middle mouse, and it's now kind of like freehand rotating around. So I'll just move it up slightly. There we go. Okay, this is just a fool around session, so don't worry if you're making mistakes. We'll get to actual practical building stuff in the next part. I'm just trying to find ways to throw in these like fundamental tools. Rotate, right? So the monkey's head is just, he needs to look dead on at the camera, and currently he's off. Ah, what an excuse to use the rotate tool. So you could enable the rotate tool, right? The familiar axis there. You could click and rotate it around like that. Again, most people prefer to remember the hotkey, which is R to rotate, right? So it's now just freehand rotating on my cursor. Remember the axes, as I mentioned before, can be used for any mode. So the X axis will rotate back and forth, the Y axis, tilt it, or Z, there we go, to turn it towards the camera. Just a little bit, right? And there you go, F12. And we've done it. Let's save it. Let's upload it to ArtStation, and then just wait for the recruiters, essentially. All right, let's start a new scene so that we can get ready for part 2, where we're going to actually start.
$5 says he didn't actually upload that image to his ArtStation. What a troll. Yeah, that's fair. It's $20 isn't buying you anything in Canada. And I don't really want to go buy a Gorilla Tape.
Building our donut and learning some of the more core features of Blender. So click here, and I will see you in part 2. Now we know how Blender functions, let's start building that donut. So, as before, let's, well, first of all, just to repeat, make sure you're working with a new scene. Completely new scene, don't want any remaining monkey heads lying around. Let's begin a fresh slate, and let's delete our default cube, just with the delete key, and let's replace it with a new.
Alright, let's switch to a new scene here. File, new, general. In Canada, I have a question for you. I was driving home and saw a fiberglass statue on the roadside of a giant moose with wings. What kind of sauce do you dip those wings in? And why have you been hiding moose wings from the world drop kit? It's a funny name for a chest bit. For a chest break. Look, we can't share all of our secrets with you guys. We shared poutine. Let's leave it at poutine.
new object. You might remember the hotkey for that is Shift A. And as I mentioned before, you usually want what is underneath mesh because these are your primitives. So we want to start with something that most resembles what it is we're building. If it was a house, you might start with a cube. If it was a vase, you might start with a cylinder. In our case, we want the donut-shaped one, although mathematicians call it a torus for some reason. So let's add that. Now, if I zoom in by scrolling up, we can see we have something resembling a donut. It looks like a pretty weak-looking donut, very flimsy. Looks like the donut before it's cooked.
I don't like this. This donut has no girth to it.
And they just drop it into the vat, and it's just this little wispy thing. So immediately after you do some actions in Blender, you have options to change it. And the options are hidden down here in the bottom left-hand corner. You see a little box. And if you click that box, you see options. And look, we can change the dimensions of our torus. Now, something to note is that these options in Blender only appear immediately after you have done that action. If you do another action, you have options to change it. And the options are hidden down here in the bottom left-hand corner. You see a little box. And if you click that box, you see options. And look, we can change the dimensions of our torus. Now, something to note is that these options in Blender only appear immediately.
Yes, ranch would probably be the correct dipping sauce, but really you can drink them in anything.
Immediately after you have done that action. If you do another action, like say deselect your torus. Now, something to note is that these here in the bottom left-hand corner, you see a little box. And if you click that box, you see options. And look, we can change the dimensions of our torus. Now, something to note is that these options in Blender only appear immediately after you have done that action. If you do another action, like say deselect your torus by mistake, it's gone, right? Because Blender has assumed you have moved on. You've accepted the state of your donut, and this is the one you want, right? Now, if you haven't done anything drastic or changed this object in some severe way, you can temporarily bring it back by hitting F9. I never actually remember that hotkey. I just remember that immediately after I have added an object, if I want to tweak it, now's my chance before I move on to something else. Okay, so we could change, the size of it here. We can also change the resolution. I'll use the term resolution loosely. To make it higher or lower fidelity. And a mistake that a lot of beginners make, and I say this because this was the exact mistake I made way back in 2003 when I started learning Blender, is they go, well, I need a realistic looking donut, so I guess I need to go really high resolution. I remember my first project, one of my first projects was for a high school film project, and I wanted to have a close-up of a face. Didn't realize faces were going to be difficult, but I went really high poly, and then it was just an absolute nightmare to work with. So the reason you don't want this is that, for starters, things that are high poly are very slow to render, and they're very hard to work with if you want to tweak the shape of it. But also, as you learn and you grow with 3D, you'll discover that it is a lot easier to add resolution to something later on, but it's very difficult to take it away if you've
I used to live.
already built it into it and you don't need it. So
Blue cheese dip is okay.
As few polys, these are called polys, as you can get away with. So I'm going to go with 32 major and 12 minor. And don't worry that it looks all jagged because we will.
32 is 32. Can you do math in this? So if we do 2 to the power of 6. That math ain't right. Oh, okay. What would it be? It'd be 2. Is that it? Can't remember. Yeah, there we go. It starts at 6 though for... Right? 6 is like the base, if I'm not mistaken, or is it... No, I think it's like 4, 8, 12. Is it 2, 4, 8, 12, or does it start at 6? There was like a rule of thumb when it came to circles. What does that become? What is that? Undefined. Oh, because we're dividing by 0. Love it. 10 out of 10. Did you assume his IKEA status? Jeez, what a guy. What is the rule for subdivided circles? 3D rule for is it just that it needs to be divisible by 2?
Hey everyone, today we're going to cover the difference between subdivision and low poly modeling and tips for making here is always appreciated as I continue to grow the content videos. So now the main difference from that here, so as you can see, and grenade over the next few videos is how to take this grenade and subdivide it. Now the important thing
Multiples of 8? Okay.
here is to understand some tips before we get into.
So would multiples of 6 also work? Right? Because like if I've got 6 and then I do 6 to the power of 2, it'd be 32. 32 divided by 2. Eight. Yeah, so we could do that. We could do literal divisible by 2, right? 2. Minimum is 3 apparently. So 32. We'll stick with 32 for now. I think this is still a bit too poly. But 12 is also divisible by that's a 6. Right? Oh, okay.
We'll fix that in a moment. Now, the major and minor, this is really up to you, but I find that something that looks it's kind of chunky, like a fat donut, just looks really delicious. So I'm going with something around about this size, okay? And once I'm happy with this, once I'm ready to click off, I click off, the options are gone, and this is it.
Do you know what? This makes me want Krispy Kreme.
This is the donut that I am now working with. So how do we make this look higher resolution, less jagged? Well, one way is to use smooth shading. So if you right-click with the object selected, go to Shade Smooth. And look at that, this is immediately better. Without getting too technical, this is kind of a fakery. It's sort of like the shader is telling the renderer that this is a really high poly dense mesh when it really isn't. It's just basically kind of like averaging out faces. And anyway, it's very technical, but basically it's not going to add anything to your render time, but it's going to look smoother. And so
This is actually something I'm wondering. Does this like subdivide behind the scenes, or is this? You didn't even spell Krispy Kreme right. Of course they're greasy. They're literally fried in oil and then served to you fresh off the thing. Oh yeah, no, I'm entirely aware of that. I've tried to push that on a little bit on a buddy of mine who's building a game. I'm just like, don't worry so much about poly count, right? Worry more about like the prep and stuff like that. So like your textures. I've had conversations with people about this where I'm just like, let's worry about textures, right? Like textures are more important than poly count at this point. With obviously within reason, right? Some people are like, oh yeah, but what if I have like 61 billion poly assets in there? And it's just like, well, yeah, you're gonna take a performance hit, but like um, sup, Don? I caught the very end of your WoW stream on the other day. Yesterday? Was it yesterday? No. Might have been Friday. I don't remember. Anyways, what the fuck do you mean by primitive prep? So there's like there's a lot of prep work that goes into the into the model before it gets sent over to the GPU. So the GPU is only figuring out um it really just does the rent. It's hard to explain. Make it a point to kill at least 10 alliance per season. Stan started a war in Tarnaris yesterday. Nice. So there's a lot of especially in Unreal. There's a lot of pre-prep that goes on before you punt the object over to the GPU to actually process it and put it on screen. Like in Unreal, it has a process of trying to figure out exactly how many primitives and points it needs to worry about and trimming that, and that's nanite. It's all done CPU. Prepping and loading the and punting the textures is done on the CPU. And then it gets applied there. Let's see. So you want to kind of wait. Is that a video that goes over the details of CPU prep?
Ever played a game with crazy amounts of stuff, yet running so smoothly that it seems like magic? Behind that buttery smooth performance is more than just powerful hardware. I started as a graphics engineer almost 20 years ago, and since then, I've always been fascinated with optimizations. But one stands out as both incredibly simple, yet the reason why it works is more complex than most people realize. Let's examine one of the most effective optimization techniques available, and understand it to the same level of depth that experienced engineers do. Let's start with a little world, and we'll add a bunch of stuff to it. This will serve as our kind of testbed to show things off, so we'll keep things reasonably simple. Let's go ahead and add an object to the world here. So we've got our player and this object. The idea is relatively simple. This object will have several versions, each being
Hey, what engine do you think this person's using right now?
progressively simpler. So here's the most complex or detailed version of the object, and we can sort of pan the camera down the line looking at these simpler and simpler versions. These will be called levels of detail.
I think
or
I've seen
LOD.
this video.
What we're going to do is, when we place one of these objects in the world, we'll start it nearby for convenience. And the idea is, as the object gets further and further away from the camera, we cycle through the different levels of detail for that object. So we're a bit further away, we switch to a lower level of detail. A bit further still, and we can do that again, switch to an even lower level of detail, that sort of thing. How many levels of detail games use is a bit of toss-up. Since authoring them takes artist time, you may only have enough budget to build a high and low level of detail, or you may have money to burn, and you can build a half dozen versions of the asset. This brings us to a really awesome optimization that's used quite a bit, called imposters. For many people, this is just another level of detail, or a whole other technique. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Let's take these two objects here in the distance. From this viewpoint, what are the differences between those two? Not a whole lot, but as we move forward, we can see that something is kind of off with one of them. This one looks perfectly normal, but the other one is clearly just a picture that's rotating with us. This is a billboard, or imposter, and from far enough away, you really can't tell the difference. With a little bit of work, these imposters can be really advanced. You can render out
There's a lot going on in this video. It is worth multiple watches as you gain more truths through discovery. Yeah, no, totally.
normal maps along with the diffuse. You can render them out from multiple viewpoints and blend between them, giving you a highly versatile and incredibly low-cost stand-in for the original asset. This scene here from my previous grass video features something like 50,000 trees of various types, and it's trivially cheap to render due to most of them being imposters. The question now is, why does this technique work so well? The intuitive answer is that these models have fewer vertices, and so then it sort of makes sense that having fewer vertices equals doing less work on the GPU. But pressed for more information than that, this is kind of where the explanation stops for many people. This answer isn't wrong, per se, but at the same time, there's so much more going on here. If you were to go and buy
I brought up to one of the guys that that's been chilling. He's popped into my stream a couple of times. He's up at the top, Hagel, with a 4, and I was telling him that while he was doing some UV unwrapping, that excess verts in your UVs actually have a cost, because there's a bit of extra compute every time that it has to figure out the jump, right? Like it has to do a recalculation of like where it is relative on. I'm not sure exactly why, but this is my theory, is that it has to do an extra calculation to figure out where it is on the UV map to the object every time you come into a vert that's not connected to a previous vert.
By a state-of-the-art GPU, they list their performance these days in teraflops. That's an absurd amount of computing power. So why does just reducing the number of vertices in the scene make such an outsized difference? There's more to the story. Back in the 90s, GPUs had what was called a fixed function pipeline, which meant that the various stages of the GPU were set in stone. The hardware had different units allocated to different tasks. What this meant practically was that resources weren't shared. It was more like an assembly line with things going in one end, going through a series of fixed steps, and then coming out fully processed on the other end. All this changed in around 2004, when AMD, or ATI at the time, for those of us who have been doing this for a long time now, developed the Xenos GPU for the Xbox 360. This would be one of the earliest designs that unified the shader architecture, meaning that the shader processing units of the GPU were shared between vertex and pixel shading duties. NVIDIA followed not too long after. I think it was around 2006 with the Tesla generation of GPUs, their first unified shader architecture. What this means is that the GPU can now, I think it was around 2006.
295? I think I remember that series.
With the Tesla generation of GPUs, their first unified shader architecture. What this means is that the GPU can now perform sort of load balancing between the different types of processing. The GPU is free to dynamically allocate resources between, say, vertex and pixel processing, leading to more efficient GPU utilization. Whereas before, with the fixed function pipeline, it couldn't. So with that in mind, my uber powerful fancy new GPU realistically shouldn't be bothered too much by the introduction of even a few million extra vertices, because doing one full screen pass would be a few million pixels, but wouldn't even make a small dent in performance. If vertices and pixels are basically shared now on the hardware, there shouldn't be a difference. Let's look at this example. I have this full screen effect going, meaning that I have an expensive fragment shader running on the whole screen, every single pixel.
Yeah, that's a fun one. I've seen a few devs struggle after not realizing that running multiple UV sets has a runtime cost. Yeah.
I could be running anything. This could be changing the color, doing various blurs.
Now, there is a flip side to that, if I'm not mistaken, where if you're reusing a shade if you're reusing assets in other spots, right? Like if you've got multiple assets using the same UVs, even if you've broken them up for the objects, you're still going to get you're still going to get a little bit of a performance decrease, but it's not going to be as big, right? At least that's my understanding. I could be wrong. Yeah, that's kind of the hard. So it depend. It I think the issue is that it depends, because okay, so let's say that I've got my signs, right? So like my windows here, right? The windows here, this UV is never going to get loaded into my game because I don't actually use the UV for the windows. The windows are a shader, right? And all the windows will just use the same shader. The signs, I'm going to try and cram a bunch of signs into the same UV. So a bunch of the signs in the world can all use the same UV space, and then I don't have to worry about it. But even then, I might actually just change this, and maybe this will just be a shader or something like that. It's kind of hard to say. I might do the signs differently, but I broke them out so I can have them be a higher res than the rest of the object here. And then the body is its own little thing as well. Wait, where'd I go? Oh wait, right. Yeah, I could see that, but again, you've everything's got to be weighed. If you don't measure it, you don't know if that's what the performance impact is. But it's gonna vary. It's gonna vary.
In reality, there's so many things that modern games do as post-effects that the exact contents of the shader isn't that important. The only important point here is that we're running at 100 FPS. Now, let's work through some numbers together to get a sense of the scale of the work the GPU is currently doing. So this screen that I'm recording is on 1920 by 1080. So 1920 multiplied by 1080 is 2,073,600 pixels in total, or let's round that to a cool 2 million pixels. And I'm doing a ton of work in the pixel shader. Here in the
Oh,
vertex
yeah,
shader, it's
I should
incredibly
do
bare.
this.
There's barely any work in here. In fact, the fragment or pixel shader is doing a magnitude of more work than this. But if I do something really dumb, just to illustrate a point, and make a buttload of triangles, in fact, one quad for every pixel on the screen, so there's 2 million pixels, that means we've got around 4 million triangles. Despite the awesome power of this GPU, the frame rate drops catastrophically. It absolutely just grinds to a crawl. So why is it that the raw power of our GPU doesn't translate to handling these 4 million triangles effortlessly? Something else is going on here. Let's unravel this further. If we're looking at a single quad, that's composed of 2 triangles, which are themselves composed of 4 vertices. It's not a whole lot. If we expand that out to a full screen of quads, we get somewhere in the ballpark of 4 million triangles, and thus roughly 4 million vertices in total. If you think about a screen having 2 million pixels already, and we're able to do many full screen passes, and all of the associated shader computation that comes with it, that number of vertices isn't impressive. We can try out a few different numbers to see how this affects things. We already know that a single quad is pretty quick, but what happens as we increase the number of quads, and thus the number of triangles and vertices? We can start out by just doubling the number of quads used, and we don't see much in the way of difference in performance. If anything is happening, it's pretty minor at best. But as we scale the count up aggressively, as we make the size of the quad smaller, and thus the number of quads needed to fill up the screen increases, effectively increasing the triangle density on the screen, we start to notice a drop-off in performance. Initially, it's nothing crazy, but what we see is that it's not a gradual decline, there's a real drop-off at some point. Between tiles roughly sized 4x4, that's 4 pixels high and 4 pixels wide, and then 2x2, we see this absolutely catastrophic drop-off in performance. It's just bananas how bad this gets. Let's talk a bit about how GPUs work, to get a better understanding of why this is failing so badly.
So fun fact, CD Project's solution on that front was to rig together a 16-layer masking data structure in order to do the bulk of their surfacing without tiling textures. Is tiling textures bad? I thought tiling textures was fine.
There's this really great post by NVIDIA called Life of a Triangle, NVIDIA's logical pipeline, that kind of gives you a behind-the-scenes look at what happens between that API call and when things finally appear on the screen. AMD also has a really great talk entitled All the Pipelines, Journey Through the GPU, which has a nice overview of the different stages that basically happen between you attempting to draw something and pixels appearing on the screen. We'll loosely follow along with NVIDIA's, but I'll provide you with a link to the AMD one in the description. So if we imagine things starting out in our own code, we'll initiate the whole thing with some sort of draw call. In WebGL, this might look something like gl.drawElements. Vulkan might be something like vk command draw indexed, etc. I mean, these specific commands aren't important.
So Nanite is expensive. As a whole, Nanite is actually very expensive. So is Lumen. Nanite and Lumen are actually very expensive things. You need a relatively decent computer to actually utilize Nanite and Lumen properly, right? Like, sure, you can performance optimize, but there is always going to be a point where Lumen and Nanite fall apart completely. You technically pay the fill rate cost of every single layer in the masking stack for every pixel. Yes. Every pixel still gets processed, and it doesn't skip any of them. And then it just gets thrown away. So you're just redrawing over the same pixels over and over and over and over and over again. So if you can compress the number of times that you do that, then you can save on performance. And once it makes it to the GPU is very performant at doing this. So if you can compress if you can do mass compression on what you're sending to the GPU ahead of time, it will speed up your game. And that's what Nanite does. But it does it on the triangles, like the polys, right? And it tries to figure out what polys are not going to be affected, what polys are not in the game, right? Versus like what polys are actually visible. And it tries to send over the minimum number of polys.
What happens now is that the driver goes ahead and validates whatever you sent, making sure the data even makes sense before prepping it into a GPU-friendly format. That makes its way over to the GPU, which does some processing. Let's just kind of skim this. The important takeaway here is that it creates batches of triangles to work on, and these are sent to these parts of the GPU that NVIDIA calls GPCs, or graphics processing clusters. Let's not wander too far off into the weeds here, but let's just mentally go with the idea of GPCs as being capable of handling a portion of the graphics rendering independently from others. So obviously then, the more you have of these, the better, because that means your GPU can theoretically do more work simultaneously. The important part at this stage is that these will grab the vertex data for the triangles and begin scheduling work for each vertex. It'll do the vertex processing at this point, and the NVIDIA doc goes over various tricks and optimizations they use, which aren't super super important for the sake of simplicity. In the AMD talk, they specifically refer to this as the primitive assembler, or PA stage, whose job is to put together a triangle and then forward that onto the rasterization stage. This is a bit like a step in an assembly line that takes a bunch of pieces, the individual vertices, and builds your primitives for you, usually triangles. The next stage basically involves figuring out who's going to be doing the fragment shader work. So at a course level, they're kind of testing the triangle against quads on the screen and divvying up the work. You can see on NVIDIA's, depending on the screen rectangles, they're handing off the work to different GPCs, and AMD has a similar note about doing some scan conversion to test triangle overlap. The end result is a bunch of fragment or pixel shader work is getting queued up. So what it does here is it gets these 2x2 quads of pixels, that's 4 pixels per quad, and queues those up together. You can see both NVIDIA and AMD both reference this, and the simple reason is that
Yeah, I think it's coming.
at that size, they can do some efficient calculations. Stuff like texture gradients for bitmapping, well, a 2x2 quad has just enough information to do that, while not being more complex to implement.
I have a feeling though that AMD is probably going to be the one that makes most of the breakthroughs in game development in the next couple of years. Like in not necessarily the next couple of years, but like in the future, I think AMD is going to overtake for gaming related stuff. Because NVIDIA is just so heavily focused on AI only at this point. And some of their expanding the hardware, the actual dedicated hardware for doing graphic stuff is something I don't think that they're particularly concerned about anymore. I could be wrong.
Implement from a hardware point of view. So pretty much everyone will do this. At this point, there's a bit more work to do, depth testing, blending, various other operations before finally getting output, but that's how pixels are born. One obvious question that falls out of this is, if 2x2 quads of pixels are the smallest possible unit the GPU works with, what happens if I draw a triangle smaller than that? Good question. And this is where you're realizing the GPUs are basically built with, you could say that it's an assumption about what you're going to draw. And that's pretty reasonable. Hardware engineers are looking for ways to maximize the GPU's potential and then teach you what to do and what not to do. So basically, there's an assumption that there's a given ratio between triangle size and pixels covered. And at some point past this, they'll still support whatever it is you're trying to do, but in a very disapproving way. When you try to draw something smaller, the GPU absolutely can still do it. Well, what happens is that you've got this 2x2 quad, which is kind of like the smallest unit the GPU works with. The triangle inhabits this quad here. What happens to the other three? The answer is that the GPU still does the work, but then it just throws away the result. In fact, it's always doing this. Just most of the time, you don't notice it. In this case, it threw away 75% of the work, but let's imagine that we have a bigger triangle. So let's look at a bigger screen here, and then we've got a triangle that's being rendered. So it's touching a bunch of pixels, right? Except we now know that the GPU works with quads. So it's actually touching a whole bunch of quads, some of which lie right on the edges of the triangle. All of these quads here that lie on the edge of the triangle, they have pixels that lie within the triangle, and some that don't. But the GPU will perform the work for the entire quad each time. There's not much you can do about this. It's a natural consequence of rendering. Some of this work, the GPU is just going to have to throw away. It'll be
Well, yeah, but I think the primary reason why I see AMD overtaking AMD overtaking NVIDIA for game performance in the future is because NVIDIA really came out as they're rebranding themselves to be an AI company now, right? And some of their moves, if you look at them, they're very laser focused strictly on AI, and they don't care about their passion for graphics is waning very fast. So I imagine that that's going to, in the next 10 years, pan out in a drop in quality for some level of graphics related stuff in the future. But I think that we're still a long ways off from actually seeing a noticeable difference. I think they're still going to dominate graphics for at least a couple more years. Maybe like the next 2 lines of cards will still be really heavy on that. Now, for parallel compute, I think they're going to dominate that. So shaders, I think, are going to outperform on NVIDIA cards and AMD. And I don't think that I don't think AMD has a way of catching up on that, to be honest.
wasted. But what you can affect is what kind of triangles you feed to the GPU. Really small triangles are an obvious terrible case. You get really poor quad utilization, throwing away an obscene amount of GPU performance. But we can go a bit further and examine different topologies for a mesh. By topology, I mean the ways the vertices are arranged to form the mesh. You can triangulate a mesh in many ways, and it's important to understand that they're not all treated the same by the GPU. Emil Persson, a senior graphics engineer at Epic Games, known extremely well within graphics circles as Hummus, has a great blog which I've referenced in the past. For example, in the last video I talked about occlusion systems, and one point I made was based on a talk he did for Avalanche Games. Anyway, there's a nice article talking about how the topology of a mesh affects the performance. What the article goes into detail is examining how different triangulations of the same mesh result in different performance, while things like the mesh's area, or other things like...
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you on that. It's just that like I can see a world where AMD starts pumping out cards that have like more purpose built like hardware acceleration built into them for specific graphics stuff, like game graphics and stuff like that, where Nvidia is never going to do that. So like Nvidia is going to get faster and more parallel and more cores. And their math is going to get faster with more cores and more parallel compute. But at the same time, AMD has the ability to start releasing like purpose-built hardware, purpose-built chips, right? Yeah, no, they're like I don't think there's a world where AMD catches up in raw horsepower, and the compute for Nvidia is always going to be greater. But like ray tracing, I think is something that they're going to start like slowly. They because like right now they have dedicated ray tracing hardware, right? If I'm not mistaken, and like dedicated encryption or encoding hardware and stuff like that. But like in the future, I don't know if dedicated hardware encoding for video makes sense for AI, right? Unless they're doing something with video encoding in AI, and in that case, that makes a big difference. So I guess it all depends on like which direction AI starts moving in and where where on the line graphs does Nvidia want to land. I don't know. I could be wrong. I think gaming is something that they don't care too much about anymore, though.
Like number of triangles are kept constant. The findings shouldn't surprise us. As we can see, what the test did was to increase the number of vertices and gauge performance. We can see that the max area approach worked out best, while making ever thinner triangles did poorly, and you already know why. Because you end up with poor quad utilization, and thus the GPU does a lot of work that it has to throw away. As Emil's research showed, the specific way that a mesh is triangulated has a very direct impact on performance, and better triangulation can lead to better quad utilization, and thus
Interesting. Bad. Bad. Good. Yeah, but they still have many years of dominating gaming, and it could end up panning out that uh everything to do with ML that they're working on ends up just benefiting gaming. And if that's the case, AMD has no hope of catching up. So, like what Zach just pointed out, that the RTX dedicated hardware um, is it like that hardware could just benefit AI a lot. And if that's the case, then it's something that they have more money to throw at, and they're willing to play in those spaces in a very, we will push the boundaries to new heights, and we are not letting off the gas, because they're not letting off the gas with anything to do with AI. So anything that they see as this will help AI push our AI focus um, will likely outperform anything that um, AMD is going to be able to do. Yeah, there you go.
thus less wasted work from the GPU. So given that understanding, what happens now if instead of 1 quad per pixel, what happens if we push things further? Let's start upping the number, and we'll go to 4 quads per pixel, or 9 quads per pixel, or even 16 quads per pixel, or whatever. And what you'll see is that the frame rate will start to tank further and further. It's a lot of triangles, but not that many. It's about 2 million to start and grows to 8 million, 18, 32 million. This was an interesting topic of exploration on G-Truck's blog, who was looking at the effect of subpixel triangles on performance. As they noted near the bottom, as you crank the number of vertices up, the frame rate absolutely tanks, even if you're rendering to lower resolution. This post is quite old now, and I don't have access to the exact same setup that was used there, so my numbers don't match exactly, but I am seeing terrible performance, which is realistically all that matters. This goes back to the idea that your GPU is this super powerful monster that can take on anything, and a bunch of triangles, in the grand scheme of things, isn't that much. So then what's behind this drop in performance? Let's revisit that primitive assembly stage, but this time through the lens of AMD's RDNA architecture, as detailed by their journey through the GPU talk. We touched on that earlier, where we can think of primitive assembly like a step in an assembly line that takes a bunch of pieces, the individual vertices, and builds your primitives for you, usually triangles. So on slide 19, on the RDNA architecture, we can see that various parts of the pipeline have been labeled. And there's this one here, called the primitive assembler, which as we know is important for assembling vertices into a triangle, and then it outputs it to the next stage, which is often called rasterization. This is where it gets interesting. So this will obviously vary from architecture to architecture. I mean, you can go and find the information sometimes. For example, we can look at the RDNA architecture white paper from AMD. This goes into some details on how the Navi class GPUs work. There's a lot of info in here, but we can kind of focus on what we want from here, which is some info about primitive assembly. Specifically, they talk about how they scale the architecture. So as we can see, they have this detailed breakdown of how the Navi class GPUs, like the Radeon RX 5700 XT, which came out in 2019, we can see how they're structured. They consist of what are called shader engines. The Radeon RX 5700 XT has 2 of these, and within a shader engine, they're further divided into shader arrays, which contain, among other things, a primitive unit and a rasterizer. This is analogous.
I don't think that's how, actually it might be how NVIDIA still works. Anyways, this is getting way too off in the weeds right now. Great talk. Off into the weeds then.
So this is generally what you want for something that is smooth and organic looking like we want. If you were rendering like architectural or like hard surfaces, like later on we're going to put this on a counter, then the object would obviously want to be flat. But in our case, we're just going to use shade smooth. But you might notice that looking at this, especially if you go side on, that you've got this sort of a jagged shape.
Oh yeah, that was actually something that I was going to ask was, does this actually increase poly count, or is this something that shade smooth just bends the normals, right? I think it just bends normals, right? And then if I took this into Unreal, would I still get the shading, the shade smooth effect? Or is this only in Blender? I think it's only in Blender, right?
Around here, right? So the silhouette is really breaking that illusion that this is a high poly or a smooth looking donut. But thankfully, rather than adding all of that complex density into the mesh itself and then making it hard to move later on, there's another way through modifiers. So if we go over here to our properties, right, this very confusing, lots of option looking properties, click on the wrench, and this is the section called modifiers. And this is one of those object dependent things. So if you've got your camera selected, you won't see it. So it's only when you've got actual meshes that you might see this modifier here. So it's much easier to explain if we just add one. So up here, add modifier, and you've got a range of options here that can do a whole number of things. The one we're looking for is underneath generate, and it is
If you can get it to import correctly.
called subdivision surface. And it is a really common modifier that you use all the time. In fact, it's so common. One we're looking for is underneath generate, and it is called subdivision surface. And it is a really common modifier that you use all the time. In fact, it's so common, it's actually, you can just immediately add it to any objects by hitting Control 1. But don't do that because we've already got it, so there. Now, some of you might have just discovered that your donut has disappeared. If that is the case, you need to go to Edit, Preferences, and then underneath
You said Control 1?
Viewport, where it's got subdivision at the very bottom, disable GPU subdivision. That will then make the subdivision perform on your CPU instead of your GPU, which is maybe non-existent or not performing, whatever. But disable that and it should appear. But if it's already working for you,
Wait. Yeah, whatever. It works. That's all that
instead of
matters.
your GPU, which is maybe non-existent or not performing, whatever. But disable that and it should appear. But if it's already working for you, don't disable it. Keep it going because GPU will be faster. So what exactly is this doing? Well, it's a lot easier to explain if we look at the shade flat mode because we're not being tricked by the smooth shading there. If I set this levels viewport to 0, this is our
Wait, what did you do?
it should appear. But if it's already working for you, don't disable it. Keep it going because GPU will be faster. So what exactly is this doing? Well, it's a lot easier to explain if we look at the shade flat mode because we're not being
Oh, okay. Wait, we need to select it, and then we need to go shade flat. There we go.
tricked by the smooth shading there. If I set this levels viewport to 0, this is our original mesh. This is before we add the subsurface, essentially. When we increase this, you can see that it is adding resolution to our mesh. And the more I increase this viewport levels here, the finer and finer that detail becomes. So to explain, because this is such a very, very common modifier, it's kind of important to understand how it's working. You can see that this is these squares here, these are called faces, by the way. And for each one of these faces here, as I add a level, you can see it's becoming 4 faces, right? And then now if I zoomed in on this one face here, if I do another level, that's now become 4 faces. And then if I zoom in again, it's now become 4 faces. So it's exponentially adding detail. And you might also know that it is smoothing it out as well. Like this jagged edge that we've got here, you can see now becomes smoother. So quickly visualize that. If I just draw, like imagine
I fucking crashed Blender. Not very far along. When I step away for a moment. Yeah, you step away from a moment for a moment and I crash fucking Blender. So what I did, and I can repeat it, is I came over here and I typed in 10 and I hit enter and then it crashes Blender. So Blender doesn't like when I do things that are bad.
Then you've got like a 90-degree corner, right? Like this. If you add a subsurface modifier, what it's going to do is it's going to add a point here, right? Because this is the extra detail. It's also going to take that point there and it's going to average.
I managed to get laid off while still having a bunch of weird governance meetings I have to go to. So now I get to yell at Pixar in Wait, what? You still have to work but you're laid off? That doesn't make any sense. Pixar should just still be paying you.
Average it out. It's going to average it out between these points. And it's going to create another one there, another one there. So you go then from having that really hard corner there to having something that looks a lot smoother. So it's going to take a point and it's also going to change it to make it look smoother, generally speaking. So there we go. So now as I increase this, you can see it's getting smoother and smoother. Now the reason there are two options here, you've got levels viewport and levels render. So reminder, this gray area that we operate in is called our viewport. The render is the pretty version. So as an example, you can see if I just turned it off for the viewport, it looks very jagged. But then for my render, if I increase that to 3, if I do my render, which you go up there and render image, or remember the hotkey F12, you can see that that donut is now smooth. But I go back and you can see it's jagged. So the viewport, you want to generally keep it lightweight, and then the render time, that's where you want to get a really nice looking pretty image. So you want to often have two different levels. In our case though, I don't really think we need to go beyond one, even for our final pretty image, because this with shade smoothing turned on is good enough. And we're going to be adding more to the scene later on, so we don't want to make it too complex. So this is actually pretty good. Okay, so we have a perfect donut, and that's the problem. It's too perfect. You could spend decades trying to develop a machine in the real world that made a donut this perfect, and you never would. This is so mathematically precise that the eye will always see this as looking fake. So that's actually a problem you learn pretty quickly in 3D, that things that are too perfect just look fake. So you have to spend time making things look misshapen and adding variation there, like you see in the real world, because your eye expects to see it. So how do we do that? How do we make this donut look a little more lumpy and interesting? I do that by changing the mesh itself. So
I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. The hell of working with folks who are all named Gene something is indescribable.
But this mode that we are in right now, where we can click on different objects, is called object mode. And I know that because in the top left-hand corner, you can see we are in object mode. But if I click the drop-down, you can see I get a number of other options here. And these options, again, will change depending on the object you've got selected. If I've got a lamp, my little light there selected, you can see I've only got object mode. My camera, I've only got object mode. But a mesh will give you extra options here. So let's enter into edit mode. Ooh. Right, now you can see our mesh, our object has become something that looks weird. It's got a bunch of little points on it with lines and very technical. Well, that's because this is actually what the mesh is made up of. These little points here, which you can click on just by selecting, are called your vertices. The singular term is called vertex. I never say that. I like to just call all of them vertices, regardless of whether it's one or two, just because you always get some comments that go, actually, it's called vertex if it is singular. Anyway, so these are called your vertices, and if you have two of them joined by a line, that is called an edge, and if you have four of them forming a face, then it's called a face. So with these, I can quickly change the shape of my object by using the same hotkeys as before, and if I want to move...
Joke here is that the third middle name is the exact kind of Gene something name I'm making fun of. What? Wait. I lost some stuff here. It's more me continuing with obligations to an open source project. Ah, okay, that makes sense. If I left, we'd be stuck with a bunch of Finns making all the decisions, and that's simply unacceptable. What's wrong with the Finns? Or worse yet, Quebecers. Now that's a terrible outcome. Nobody likes Quebec. The hell of working with folks in something. Is this the donut tutorial? It is the donut tutorial. How is your 80 billion hour live stream going, Miss Rose? Is it Miss Rose or Mrs. Rose? I can never remember which one's which. I'm still going, I figured. I can't remember which one is like married and which one is not married. Yeah, I'm working in the hellscape that is Blender right now.
Move this, then I would simply tap G, right? You can see it's now attached to my cursor, and if I want to confirm its movement, I just do a single left click, and there it is.
Wait. How did he get that?
It's called a face. So with these, I can quickly change the shape of my object by using the same hotkeys as before, and if I want to move this, then I would simply tap G, right? You can see it's now attached to my cursor, and if I want to confirm its movement, I just do a single left click, and there it is. Now if I go back into object mode, like that, you can see that my mesh has changed, okay? And by the way, the hotkey for jumping in and out of object and edit mode is just tab, okay? So you can see it's just toggling between those two modes because it's so common that you want to just quickly change things that it's just easily accessible by that. Now, this is okay, right? But you can see it's got like some artifacting. It's not the greatest lump, right? So how do we make it a little more natural? Well, I mean, you could, you move one, drag it out, okay, click, and then I move the next one next to it, right? I'll move that out, and then I'll move this one out a little bit, and then I move this one. And it's like, okay, well now I've got the thing, but it took me like 5 actions. Ridiculous, right? No one wants to do that. No one's got time for that. Thankfully, there is a tool in Blender just for this, and it's called proportional editing, and you can enable it up there in your toolbar. So if you enable that, now if I hit
Wait, what?
tool in Blender just for this, and it's called proportional editing, and you can enable it up there in your toolbar. So if you enable,
Where's proportional? It's oh, here it is. Oh. Whee! That's not what I want.
all that. Now, if I hit G and I move it out, you'll see I get a little ring around my cursor there, and that is now changing the mesh around it. Now, a lot of people in my previous tutorials were like, I don't see what's going on. You have to have something selected first, and then when you hit G, you will see that little circle of influence. Okay, now this circle of influence, if I scroll down, sorry, if I scroll up, you can see it's shrinking its circle of influence. If I scroll down, it is expanding its influence. So it's only going to affect what is in that ring there, okay? If you are on, if you don't have a mouse with a scroll wheel, you can also change the influence by using...
Okay, so this is stupidly named. Proportional editing. Why can't they just use the same name as everybody else is using? It's like soft select or fuzzy select. I face tanked my way through the early stages. Never had a chance. It is. There's actually a donut tutorial because Blender isn't like other girls. Blender is like other girls. It's the Houdini. What is it? YouTube. I did it once. Houdini donut. Are you? It's great. It's 10 out of 10. The thing about the Houdini donut tutorial versus the Blender donut tutorial is the Blender donut tutorial makes me want to kill myself, and the Houdini donut tutorial is actually amazing. So, you know what? Sounds about right.
Using page up and page down. And if you don't have page up or page down because you're on a Mac keyboard, then what you would have to do is go to key map and then change your page up and page down to something else, just so that you can get around that. But guys, you gotta get a mouse. Get a mouse with a scroll wheel. I think they're, I don't know, 50 cents or just in the nearest landfill somewhere. Get a mouse because it's gonna make your life in 3D a lot easier. Okay, so with this, I can now make quick work of lumpy shapes. Okay, so I just drag that out. Okay, I've got a little lumpy shape there. Maybe I go down here and I pull this up just by hitting G, moving it up. Okay, so already this is looking a little more natural, right?
Okay, so we're gonna go do this. Like, I'm getting better at this. I hate that it's that you have to hit G every time. That's annoying. Do you know what I really like about the Blender tutorial? Or sorry, not the Blender tutorial, the Houdini tutorial. Vertex groups in Blender were almost named clusters at one point. Barely managed to avert that one. Why? Mm. Okay. I got to show you this. So the equivalent of where I'm at right now inside of Houdini, right? Like if we want to mimic exactly where we're at right now, right? We would do a tortoise. Throw that down. There's our tortoise, right? It's beautiful. Come into it. Make sure that we select it here. We want 32. I think that's what we've got, right? This is actually the same tortoise, right? But we want to subdivide. There we go. Now our donut is the same. We could also just do a smooth on that, right? But that would be a bad idea, I think. So we're going to come back, right? What we want to do now, right, is we want to add in some mountains. You know, all donuts need a little bit of mountains. There we go. Look at that. Oh, look at how irregular that is. But that's not what we're looking for. So we're gonna bring this down right there. Got like no donut, nothing. There we go. And then we can come down and we can find. I think there's a seed in here somewhere. But we can play with all of these to find the exact thing that we want. Yeah, I don't know where it is. So there, and now I've got this very much nicer looking little donut here that has like a little bit of oddity. but not too much, and I don't have to go. This is where Blender started breaking down for me, is that like I was like, I don't want to move these vertexes like by hand because I'm not going to do a great job at this. So I have to come in and be like, oh, I want this one to go up or down or whatever. And I got to come over here and we got to move it over like that. Right? Maybe like this one here, we bring this one down or over or up or something. That. We got to do it here too. Right? We're making it slightly irregular. But because I'm a human, it's not going to look as nice. No, I realized that. It's just that like, so the point of this part is to get you to a point where you can move these verts reasonably well, because vert movement is something that's is kind of important when you're doing 3D modeling, right? If you're building something, you need to be able to move verts around. So I get it, but it's just one of those things where it's like I wish that I was past this, and the getting past it part is the painful part.
Because even if we were making a stylized world for a Pixar movie or something like that, you can't have just a spherical looking donut, round looking circular donut, because it just, your eye will see it as fake. So very quickly, I'm able to add a little bit of variation to the donut, just all around it, just a little bit over here, and you can see that I am just changing my circle of influence depending on.
Actually, I wonder if there's a modifier for this. Okay. Let's see if there's a modifier, because there's modifiers, right? I don't think this is right. Yeah, this isn't it. Add modifier. Would it be GeoNode? New? And okay, so this is where I want to try something here, right? So we go to YouTube, right? And this is where I break off from regular tutorials. Blender, add roll noise to mesh.
What's going on, guys? Josh here with the Pride Productions back in Blender with the 14th modeling tutorial, and we're going to talk about the displacement modifier today and a couple cool things you can do with it. This is a big shout out to my old school Project Torture peeps. Back in the day when we had that channel, I can right click and click subdivide. Now, before you do anything else, if you paid attention, ball, bro. Now you can go and actually adjust that. Go back in there. Certainly I'm going to do this. Okay, you can see how it's subdivided there. We're going to go to the viewport. I'm going to set it to number 4. Now, they're all kind of faces now. Okay, you can't really see them, but we're going to do is faces. Now in object mode, there's tons of them. But in edit mode, there ain't none of them, bro. You know what I'm talking about? We're going to get it now.
I feel like he's trying too hard.
Before we add a displacement modifier, and we're not going to, if we actually apply this, it's going to apply all those faces. We're not going to apply it. If we're going to add modifier, there is going to be a displacement modifier. But before we do anything else, we need a texture. Let me explain why. You'll see this little tiny little tab right here. It says, I think it's brushes is what it's set to, but you can tell it's only in object mode. If you click on that, it'll ask.
Well, keep in mind he's at 2 times speed.
You for a brush. And I'm gonna click on, just click the new button, and we're gonna name it, right? We're gonna clouds, bro. We're gonna clouds because I'm gonna use clouds. And when you go down here and you select which one you want, I'm gonna select clouds. It's gonna create like a texture. You got a few different ones there, bro. Okay, you got some wood. Okay, I didn't click wood. Place. You'll see that our ball got bigger, and that's exactly what I wanted. Now what we want to do is we want to actually make sure that we set whatever. Now again, now here and click on do that, and you're like, oh god. texture. We're gonna make we created one now called cloud. So if I click on it, it's gonna displace based off of that cloud texture, and it's gonna do that. And you're like, oh god, oh god, oh god. Now you can probably tell now why I have so many faces, why I wanted to subdivide it. I subdivide. Now we're gonna turn the strength. It's gonna do about like right there, bro. Like I'm doing there. You like when you got a little rocky surface, got a little bumpy ball, okay, little bumps, little warts. Okay, now the thing is, you can go through here and actually change this back to 3. Okay, you can see how.
I get, like, I keep bottoming out apparently on my mic today. I'm gonna adjust that real quick here. I don't know how bad it sounds when I bottom out though. There we go. Just moved it down just a little bit. He has too much energy, and I think it feels like he's trying a bit too hard here. Is your noise gate just a bit aggressive? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know that I have a noise gate, to be honest.
How it's instead of the 5, okay? You got all kind of warts, okay? You got a big old wart, looks like a brain, okay? Like that. And you can adjust your strength and really toy with it, maybe just make it real soft, like that, real soft. You know what I'm talking about? Now what's cool about this?
Okay, so it's displace. Here, displace. Where did he make that?
Select which one. I'm gonna click on add, just click the new button and we're gonna name it, right? We're gonna name it cloud. But you can tell it's only in object mode. If you click on that, it'll ask you for a brush. And I'm gonna click on add, just click the new button and we're gonna name it, right?
Oh, here. Oh, wait. Where are we here? Do we do new? No. Oh, there we go.
We're gonna name it clouds, bro. We're gonna name it clouds because I'm gonna use clouds. And when you go down here and you select which one you want, I'm gonna select clouds. It's gonna create like a texture. You got a few different ones there, bro. Okay, you got some wood. Okay, I didn't click wood, but now I did. Because I got wood. Now we'll go back to the clouds. Okay, we're gonna leave that alone. We're done. Go back to the modifiers. We created a texture. So now we go to add modifier and click on displace. You'll see that our ball got bigger. And that's exactly what I wanted. Now what we want to do is we want to actually make sure that we set whatever. Now again, now there's 2 modifiers showing up, so don't get a little confused. You have your displace and you have your subdivision modifier. Okay, we need to actually go to the displace one here. Go to texture right here and click on the clouds because it's asking for a texture. We're gonna make the, we created one called.
I thought I added that. Did I not? Yeah, it's showing up, right? Why is it not changing that? Maybe I made this too. Huh? Wait, what did I say? All right, have a good one, Zach. Hopefully we'll see you when you're done.
Clouds. So if I click on it, surface got a little bumpy ball, okay, little bumps. Subdivide. Now we're gonna
Oh, it's 3 years old.
Hello, this is a video to show how to add displacement map into Blender material. This is default scene in Blender. I delete the default object and I add another object. And then we can shader editor. We can add the new material in the shader loop. And then we can use the image match to method of the image texture. This is the image texture generated by generative AI. We can find the video in this video description. Now I use the texture into material. If you want to add displacement map into material, firstly, at the moment in the feature sets, we can.
Huh? That's not what I wanted.
button right here to use a texture in order to displace your object. So let's say we're going to click on new right here. So basically what we've done is we've taken this and we've created a new texture that's going to be applied to this object. That texture is going to affect where the displacement is going to occur. And so what we can do is we can come over here and click on the button for show texture in texture tab. Notice how that basically takes us to this tab right here, and it's allowing us to adjust this texture 003. And so you can apply different kinds of textures to this object. So for example, you can apply an image or movie, which we'll talk about in a second. So that could be like a displacement map.
More about behavior trees. I'll catch you later, bud. Enjoy your vacation. Oh, thank you. Enjoy the behavior trees. Behavior trees are simpler than you might.
Or something like that. But you can also use things like noise. So let's say I was to come in here and select the option for cloud right here. Well, when I select the option for cloud, what that's going to do is that's creating a procedural texture.
Why is his working and mine is not? He just attached it and it worked. Mine is not working at all. Is this like we need to put it before? It makes no difference apparently. I can just be like, oh hey, you know, it's there. Yeah, there's literally no difference. What the fuck? Add displacement clouds. His worked, mine doesn't.
Right here, so you can see
Great.
the texture.
I love it.
And
10
you
out
can
of
adjust
10.
things like the size of that material. Well, basically what that's doing is that's creating this grayscale image, and it's displacing things more or less.
Blender 4 displacement modifier not working.
In this tutorial, I will go over 6 different reasons why your material displacements may not be working in Blender. So this is a super common question that I get in the comments of my videos, so I thought I'd make a video on it. Now, if you'd like to learn how to properly set up displacements in Blender, then I have 2 tutorials you might be interested in checking out. So I have a tutorial on how to use the displacement modifier, and then I have another tutorial on how to use the material displacements. Links in the description if you'd like to check out those videos. So for demonstration in this video, I'm going to be using my procedural rock cave wall material, and I also have a growing tutorial playlist on. Now, if you'd like to problem that people run into, and that is that they don't turn on the displacements in the material settings. So if you click right here on the material properties, make sure that you have the material selected. If you open up the settings tab right here and go to surface, you can see that there's a displacement setting. And on default, when you add materials, it is set to bump only. And so when it's set to bump only, it's just going to use the bump data. So it does look like it has lots of detail, but if you look here on the side of the object, you can see that it's actually not using any displacements. So here on the material settings, you need to make sure that this is either set to displacement only or displacement and bump. Now, most times you're probably going to use displacement and bump because this way it'll use bump data as well as. So the next common problem is that you're not setting up the displacements properly. So I have this if you need to. All right, smooth out the edges. So this next reason might be very obvious to most people, but you need to make sure you are in the rendered mode in the viewport. So the 3D viewport has a few different shading options. And if you hold it for fixing your material displacements is before, if it's set to sRGB, it doesn't really look quite right. Node groups. So the first reason is that you might be using the Eevee rendering engine instead of the Cycles rendering engine. So if I just switch this over to Eevee, you can see that the Eevee. In this tutorial, I will show you how to use the displacement modifier to displace your 3D mesh in Blender. Now, if you want to use the material displacements in the node editor, then I have a separate tutorial on how to do that, and I'll have a link in the description to that video. But in this video, I will show you how to use the displacement modifier. And the material displacements won't work in the Eevee rendering engine, but the displacement modifier will work in both Cycles and Eevee, because you can see it's actually displacing the vertices here in the
Except for when it doesn't.
viewport. So I downloaded this brick texture from ambientcg.com, links in the description if you'd like to download it, and I just added it to this plain object, and I added the base color and the roughness and the normal. And this material also comes with a displacement map, so I'll show you how to add the displacement to this object using the displacement modifier. And I'll also show you how to add procedural textures to the displacement modifier as well. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that your object is somewhat high poly, because right now I have this plane, but in edit mode, and I can press the A key to select click and then modifier, and here under generate, you can add the subdivision surface modifier, or you could do some of both like what I'm doing here. So I'm going to subdivide, and that's because of the subdivision surface modifier, so it is rounding out the edges. So if you don't want the subdivision surface modifier to smooth and round out the geometry, then you can change the Catmull-Clark to simple instead. And so this way the object will keep its shape, but it will still be subdivided. Like if I added the subdivision surface modifier to a cube, you can see that it is adding more geometry, but it is rounding it. So I can instead just change it to simple, and that will still subdivide it, but it will keep the object shape. So now we need to add the displacement modifier. So let's click on add modifier, and here under deform, we can add the displace modifier. And you can see that it's just going to move it up, and that's because we haven't added any texture into the displace modifier. And also one really important thing, make sure that the displace modifier is after the subdivision surface, because if it's above the subdivision surface, it will first displace it and then add the subdivision, but I want the subdivision to give the displacement more detail. So I first want it to subdivide it, then I want it to displace it, because the modifiers work in order. So it will first use the first modifier and then the next modifier and continue to go down on the modifier stack. So I'm going to make sure the displacement modifier is after the subdivision. So we now need to add in a texture here. So I can just click on new to add a new texture. So you could add a procedural texture or you could use a texture map. I'm going to show you how to do both of them. So first we're going to add a procedural texture. So you can see that we have a texture right here, but we need to actually give it some sort of texture. So what you can do is click on this button right here, and this will just jump you down over here to the texturing properties. And then right here on the type, it is set to image or movie. So we'll be using this layer, but I'm first going to show you how to add a procedural texture. So we can click on the type here, and we can change this instead to any of of Blender's procedural textures. So we have clouds, that's pretty much like a procedural noise. We also have like Musgrave or like wood, or there's many other textures here. There's even like a marble one. I am going to use clouds in this case. So let's choose clouds, and then you can change some more of the settings right here, like with the noise basis and the type. You can play around with these to get some different noise. So I'm going to turn the depth up to like 30 so that it is very detailed, and just play around with your procedural texture. And also I'm going to
Would that be it, maybe?
use the object context menu to shade the object smooth. Now this is really strong, so to make the displacement less strong, we can just click right back here to the modifier properties, and then we can just turn the strength down on the displace modifier. And now we have a nice displacement with that procedural clouds. And I can also turn up the subdivision, so I could turn up the viewport and renders to like 4 if I wanted much more detail, or if I wanted less detail, I could turn the subdivision down. So that is how you add a procedural texture into the displacement. With the displace modifier. But I'm now going to show you how to add in a texture, because I want to add in the displacement texture that came with this material from Ambient CG. So again, I've subdivided the mesh so that it has
This doesn't work.
And so what we need to do is we need to tell Blender where to apply that modifier. So for example, let's say that we were to tab into this object. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to subdivide it, and we'll go ahead and subdivide it to a level of, we'll call it 10 for right now. But notice how at the moment, still nothing's changed. But if we come in here and we create like a vertex group, right? So I'm going to create a vertex group right here, and we'll just go into object data properties, add vertex group. We'll just call this test group right here. And we'll leave the weight at 1 right now, and we'll click on assign. Well now, if I go back into edit mode, and inside this modifier, I tell this to just displace the vertex group, notice what that's going to do is that's going to displace the vertices in here that have weight applied to them, right? So it's taking these vertices and it's moving them upwards right here. So this starts getting a little bit interesting.
Where?
In this tutorial, I will go over 6 different reasons why your material displays node groups. So the first reason is that you might be using the Eevee rendering engine instead of the Cycles rendering engine. So if I just switch this over to Eevee, you can now the second method for fixing your material displacements is probably the most common problem that people run into, and that is that they don't turn on the displacements in the material settings. So if you click right here on the material properties, make sure that you have the material selected. If you open up the settings tab right here and go to surface, you can see that there's a displacement setting, and on default when you add materials, it is set to bump only. And so when it's set to bump only, it's just going to use the
And this is what infuriates me about Blender, is that things just don't work out of the box. Nothing ever fucking works out of the box. Oh, there we go. We needed to switch to object mode. That's so weird. Oh, I hate it. There we go.
What size of a lump I want to make. So I just want to make like a little bit that sticks out. I can make a small circle just by scrolling up like that. You just want to do that until you get something that looks a little more natural. I might want to make the inner part as well. We just drag that in with a smaller circle, and that's pretty good. Let's just have a look from the top. I might actually just drag that out, make it a little bit more like that. But there you go. That's pretty good for a donut. It's still kind of simple. It's not too detailed, but it's got just enough variation in it that it's more interesting to look at. Oh, one more thing, forgot to mention. Go back into edit mode with tab. Donuts, when they're sitting in the little vat thing, right, they're only like half submerged, then they have to be flipped. But it means that the bit that's nearest to the surface is getting less heat. So essentially what I'm saying is the bit that's around the donut, the circumference of it, is usually a little bit flatter. So donuts aren't like perfectly round all the way around. They're usually a little bit flatter. So what I want to do is I want to select these vertices along here, and then I want to shrink them. Now I could go around one by one like this, which is actually what I used to do when I was learning Blender pre-YouTube days, and there was no tutorials. I would do this if I wanted to select this. Silly, because there's a function, a tool for that, and it is edge select. So if you hold down Alt on your keyboard and then do a single left click on not the points, but on the edge, like this little line here, you can see it's selected all the way around. So it's anything that's connected along that line is now selected. So if I want to shrink this, right, what would I do? Well, I mean, yeah, you could like move it around, right? We want to shrink it. We want to change the scale of it. So we would use the hotkey S for scale. So S, and I'm going to scale that in. And I actually don't want proportional editing. So I'm going to turn that off and now scale in and just make it a little bit flatter. And there you go. See, it just feels a little bit more natural, doesn't it? It looks a little bit closer to what a donut looks like. But don't worry if yours doesn't look exactly like this, like your lump is a little bit off. Like some people get a little bit too precious with the tutorial, like matching.
You said H? No. Yeah. No.
It's exactly a little bit closer to what a donut looks like. Now scale in I use the if I want to shrink this, right? What would I do? Well, I mean, yeah, you could like move it around, right? We want to shrink it. We want to change the scale of it. So we would use the hotkey S for scale. So S, and I'm going to scale that in. And I actually don't want proportional editing. Shrink it and it's connected along single left click on not because when I was learning Blender pre-YouTube days and there was no tutorials, I would do this if I wanted to select this. Silly, because there's a function, a tool for that, and it is edge select. So if you hold down Alt on your keyboard and then do a single left click on not the points,
There we go.
but on the edge, like this little line here, you can see it's selected all the way around. So it's anything that's connected along that line is now selected. So if I want to shrink this, right? What would I do? Well, I mean, yeah, you could like move it around, right? We want to shrink it. We want to change the scale of it. So we would use the hotkey S for scale. So S, and I'm going to scale that in. And I actually don't want proportional editing. So I'm going to turn that off and now scale in and just make it a little bit flatter. And there you go. See, it just feels a little bit more natural, doesn't it? It looks a little bit closer to what a donut looks like. By the way, don't worry if yours doesn't look exactly like this, like your lump is a little bit off. Like some people get a little bit too precious with it. You try to match exactly everything I do. Like I'm just working on the fly as well. So just make what you think looks good. Maybe you think this is not misshapen enough and you want to add more, go for it, because it might actually turn out better than what mine is. Now, before we move to the next part, how to save. How to save. Blender, very, very easy. Just go save as and
I'll be right back. I need water.
you just get one file. It's called .blend. Very literal file extension. Really pushing the limits of what a file extension can be. That's almost a word, Blender. Anyway, .blend, and that's it.
Blender.
And then next time you open it up, it's exactly like it. It's not like ZBrush where you got like 4 or 5 different ways to save a project or an object or a tool or a... Hate ZBrush. Okay, that's how you save. Now, also finally, I would say...
He's wrong. ZBrush is amazing.
If you need help, because I know if you're stuck and then you leave a YouTube comment, you might not get a reply. If you want immediate help, I've got a Discord, so I'll put the link below. So there's like a little channel. It's very unique. It's very shooter. It's really easy to. So if you're ready to jump to the next part. Did you guys know that Blender 4.0 had a change that makes it more realistic by default? Or that there's a new technology that is going to expand the uses for 3D exponentially? Well, you would if you were on my free share a new address and then you little donut this symbol. Now, as I mentioned before, if you want to add an object, you go Shift-A, right? And then you start looking donut onto the tutorial. Welcome back to the Donut Show, where we make sad little donuts that we cannot eat. This is where we finished up at the end of part 1. We've got our nice looking donut, and now we're going to make that icing, which looks complex, but is actually fairly simple. Now, as I mentioned before, if you want to add an object, you go Shift-A, right? And then you start with something that resembles what you're trying to create. But we already have something that resembles the exact shape we want to create. It's the donut, because we want the icing around the donut. So let's just reuse this information. So we can do that by duplicating the object. And if you don't know the hotkey for it, you just go Object, and then you find it here, where it says Shift-D. So Shift-D. Now, when you hit that, you are in a placement state, essentially, like it's
Shift D.
duplicated, and it's now saying, where do you want to place it? Now, in our case, and actually often, you don't actually want to change its placement. You want to duplicate it exactly where it was. So you can cancel the movement by hitting Escape or right-clicking. Now, when you do that, it looks like it's canceled the duplication, but you can see in your outliner, it has duplicated it. You've got 2 objects, but it's just in the exact same place, which is what we want. So first things first, we need to name them, or else we could get very confused very easily. So you can name an object by just double-clicking it in the outliner, and then just typing in the object. The other way, you can name something. I'll just show you the second way. If you select the Taurus 0.001, that's your icing object. If you're in the 3D view, where your cursor, is over the 3D viewport, if you hit F2, that's another very quick way that you can name something without having to go up to the outliner to find your object. So with our icing object selected, let's go into edit mode by hitting a tab. So we want the icing on the top, which means this bottom half of our mesh here is redundant. Don't need it. So we want to delete it. So if we just drag over the bottom here, you can see it looks like we've selected the bottom half of our donut, but if you were to move around, you would see, oh, we haven't actually. It's only selected, annoyingly, what is facing the camera. Where there's a mesh, it's not gone through the mesh. A lot of users find this annoying. I agree. Sometimes it seems like that would be the more default one that would make more sense, but anyway, don't want to argue. So if you want to select through a mesh, you can go up to here, in your top navigation, toggle X-ray. If you turn that on, it's going to enable you to see through the mesh. And now, when I drag over it, you can see that I have selected all through the mesh as I move around it. By the way, you might find it like when you're in...
Wait, where am I? What did I just do? Oh, I'm in orthographic. No. There we go. Oof.
In this state, it's kind of hard to select, like it's easy to kind of accidentally select what is above it, and depending on what you've got your end, that might have happened already. So find it like the mesh. And now, when I drag and go up, I agree, sometimes it seems like that would be the more default one that would make more sense, but anyway, don't count without having to go up to the outliner to find your object. So with our icing object selected, let's go into edit mode by hitting a tab. So we want the icing on the top, which means this bottom half of our mesh here is redundant. Don't need it. So we want to delete it. So if we just drag over the bottom here, you can see it looks like we've selected the bottom half of our donut, but if you were to move around, you would see, oh, we haven't actually. It's only selected, annoyingly, what is facing the camera. Where there's a mesh, it's not gone through the mesh. A lot of users find this annoying. I agree. Sometimes it seems like that would be the more default one that would make more sense, but anyway, don't want to argue. So if you want to select through a mesh, you can go up to here in your top navigation, toggle X-ray. If you turn that on, it's going to enable you to see through the mesh. And now, when I drag over it, you can see that I have selected all through the mesh as I move around it. By the way, you might find it like when you're in this state, it's kind of hard to select, like it's easy to kind of accidentally select what is above it, and depending on what you've got your end, that might have happened already. So another way to easily just look directly on the side-on of your donut is to just click one of these, like in your gizmo here, instead of just dragging around, just do a single click on either the green one or the red one, the X or the Y. And now we're in that state, you can see it's flattened it, so it's put you in orthographic mode, which actually you can toggle to at any time, just over there, which just makes it easier to just do a single, all the way through the mesh, select. All right. Okay. All right. So we want to delete that. So just hit the delete key. You get an extra option here of what you want to delete: edges, faces. You want the vertices. That's everything. And now we have, if we go.
There we go. Yeah, actually, I guess this is what we actually want. Delete vertices. There we go. That's better.
We go back to object mode, and then let's turn off toggle X-ray as well. And you can see it's working. You got half the donut on top of itself, but as you move around, you can see you get some flickering. Now, this flickering happens, and it's actually a very common, it's actually a good warning sign to you as an artist, because it means you've got faces on top of faces, and the 3D software doesn't know which face it wants to render, right? So it's like sometimes saying it's the front face, no, the back face, the front face, and there's no understanding. Sometimes you can actually spot it in TV shows and like VFX or like low budget stuff. You can see something flickering in the background. I'm like, ooh, there it is, Z fighting. That's what it's called, Z fighting, or Z fighting, if you're not American. So what we want to do is we want to give thickness to our icing. So we can do that with a solidify modifier. So adding another modifier. Make sure you've got your icing selected, not your donut, and then here where you've got add modifier, we're going to go generate solidify. Okay, now.
Generate.
It's made it worse. It's actually added a thickness to our mesh there, but it's actually done it the wrong way. So with the normals, it's trying to put the extra bit inside the donut. So we can change that by just changing the offset here in the solidifier settings. Just drag that all the way to 1. Some of you might have.
There we go.
You found that it was correct before, just depending on which way your normals were. If that's the case, keep it at -1, but everyone else keep it at 1. We just want to make sure it's actually outside. Okay. Also, let's just increase the thickness a little bit too. Let's go, yeah, 0.025. That looks pretty good. And great, we've got what looks like a yarmulke on our donut. A perfectly straight edge little hat for our donut. So let's make this look more like icing. So the edge is wavy all the way around. So to do this, this is where we get into the fancy, finger magic. Because you're typing lots of keys. Anyway, go into edit mode, and we can see straight away that we can't see the mesh, and that's because the solidify modifier is obstructing our view. So these little boxes here, as I mentioned before, like this is to hide it from viewport. But if you want to just hide it from your edit mode, which is the state that we're in right now, the box next to it is the one that you uncheck, which means in object mode, when you're tabbed in object mode, you can still see it, but edit mode, it's it's temporarily hidden for you. So if I was to select one of these points here and move it down, you can see that it's working, but it would be, again, a lot of effort to go round and round and do these one by one. So we want to use that old familiar proportional fall-off tool again. So proportional editing on.
I don't like this. Okay. Now we want to add another deform. Actually, I don't think I've got a good way of doing this. Okay. Whatever. We'll do this exactly this way, maybe.
And now, as I move it down, let's just lower the slider way down here, and then let's pull this down. Okay, now we'll find issues. If we move to the side here, we can see the first issue we discovered is that this is separating from our mesh here. And that's not what icing does. When it dribbles down, it follows the shape of the donut all the way down. So what we want to do is snap, let's undo it a number of times, snap the vertices to our donut underneath it. Right? So for that, we need to turn on snapping up here. Okay, now there are a number of ways to snap in Blender. The default way is increment, which just means the like the grid floor there. Like if you were to just like move it around, you can see it's just snapping to the grid floor. Not helpful. But we want to snap it to the face. And now with face snapping enabled, if we move this down, we can see, let's just look here, the bottom bit is snapping to the face, but as you might have seen, the top bits, the rest of essentially what is inside of our circle of influence with this proportional editing, that's not being affected. Only the little point that we had selected was affected. So that's not what we want either. Normally that would be enough, but in this particular case, we want to also snap individual elements too. And let's go face project. Now, when we pull this down, you should see enough, but in this particular case, we want to also snap individual elements too. And let's go
Face project. Wow, look, it did a terrible job.
face project. Now, when we pull this down, you should see that these are also no longer clipping through the donut. But still, we have issues. Why is that? Well, it is actually working correctly. We can see these are not going through the mesh. So why does it look like it is? The reason for that is that there's actually just not enough information here. So if we go side on, you can see, right, like we've got this point here, and we've got another point down here, and then we've got this long stretch in between, right? So that means that this part of the donut, oh gosh, that goes, that goes around like that, is just not, there's nothing to snap it to, essentially. So what we need to do to fix this is just add more geometry. So these little vertices here, we need more of those vertices. So we can do that by actually using the subdivision surface modifier. Because although it is a modifier, you can apply the modifier. And the modifier currently is adding geometry, so let's just apply it. So to apply it, we just click this little drop down here next to the modifier, and then go apply. Now, if we, I mean, nothing should have changed from this view because the same information is being displayed. But in edit mode, you should now see next to the modifier, apply the modifier. And the modifier currently is adding geometry, so let's just apply. So to apply it, we just click this little drop down here next to the modifier, and then go apply. Now, if
Oh, it's already applied. I think we just need a larger number, maybe 2.
we, I mean, nothing should have changed from this view because the same information is being displayed. But in edit mode, you should now see exponentially more faces because here, where there was one face before, you can see.
Oh, it's not applying.
See this now? The same information is being displayed. We just click this little drop down here next to the modifier and then go apply. Now,
why can't I apply? Why am I not able to apply? Do I do an add modifier, control 1? Oops. I want to add another. Fly. There it is. Fucking finally. But we still have a lot of problems here. Mainly that we need to do this. No, let's go into sculpt mode. And cool, cool, cool. None of this works. Wait. Wait a second. Interesting. Okay, so then if we go back to edit mode, we look at this, we get nothing that we want here. Mm. So we apply that and apply that. There we go. Why don't I see both? Where's my donut? Here, donut. Oh, wait. I think it's deleting both. There we go. Now, if I go like this. Oh, it works. There we go. There we go. And then add a modifier. To solidify. 1. And 0.2025. There we go. Beautiful. Look at that.
Now, if we, nothing should have changed from this view because the same information is being displayed. But in edit mode, you should now see exponentially more faces. Because here, where there was one face before, you can see there's now a lot more. Right? 4x. Okay, 4x. Okay. So now, if we pull down, we should see it is snapping. And if we go into this mode, you can see that it's now conforming to the mesh in a much more snug way because there's information there for it to use. Now, this shading artifact here, we can see this. Don't worry about that. We'll fix that in just a moment. But I need to, because I've shown you like 4 things that we need to enable for this to work. I got to show you one more because if I pull down and if I scroll up, you'll see something. Okay, if I was to click we get this horrible problem here. And I've done this tutorial enough, and enough people have hit this issue that I need to call it out specifically, because it seems to be a big point that a lot of people just don't know where to go from. What's happened is if we use what's it called, the circle of influence for our proportional editing, if that is so high, it's actually high enough to reach the mesh on the other side of the donut. And because we've got snapping, it's now projecting that, snapping it to the front, which is creating this, like, something that's a nightmare to fix. I mean, in fact, it's easy to start from scratch than to try to fix that. So if we want... Sorry, there's a lot of noise. To fix this, we need to hide the part of the mesh that we don't want to be influenced by our proportional tool, right? So to do that, there is an easy way to do it. We can actually do it very precisely. So with this middle bit of our donut here, if I just hold down Alt and then do a left click, as I mentioned before, that selects the ring, okay? And we could do that all the way up, but actually there's a little, I don't know, it's an Easter egg. It's kind of a cool tool that not many people know about. Control plus. That will enable the select more tool. And if you use control minus goes the other way, you can see that it's expanding out. So control plus will just like select the next vertex along a chain, roughly speaking. And you can see we can very quickly select all the parts of the mesh that we don't need, right? Very cool. By the way, if control plus doesn't work for you because you're on a laptop or something else, select more, less. You can also do it here. Anyways, to hide this part of the mesh, it's H for hide. So when you're in this state, it looks as though it's been deleted. It's very, sometimes you don't know where part of your mesh and then you forgot that you've got hide turned on. If parts of your mesh are hidden and you want to bring it back, it's Alt H. So H to hide and then Alt H to bring it back. Or if you can't remember it for whatever reason, you can also find it. Okay, it's underneath mesh. There we go. Mesh. Reveal hidden or hide selected. Okay, so that's the other way. But you can get my keyboard shortcut that's in the link. It's free. Just use that and then you won't forget a lot of these handy shortcuts. All right, so now finally, after all that, after 4 different ways of problems to explain, we can now take part of this mesh and drag it down, and it will work correctly. Haha. So now we get to now finally be an artist and go like, what sort of edge or what sort of icing do I want to make this look like? So what I'm doing here, by the way, is I'm hitting G to pull it down, and then I'm just single middle click, and then because my cursor is closer to the Z-axis, it's now snapping it to the Z-axis. So that's why I mentioned before that it's really handy. You don't have to think of the letter and type it in. You just go in the general direction you want to go, and then just tap the middle click of the which is your scroll wheel, right? Middle click. It's such a weird button. You have to call it out. It's the scroll wheel button because like no other application seems to use it besides scrolling. But Blender is like, no, we're going to use it for like 90% of the operations. It's going to be middle click. But anyways, as you can see, I'm not paying particularly too much attention to it, but I'm just making a wavy looking shape around it. You might also want to make some bits that go the opposite direction, right? And then maybe pull. So you've got like big shapes as well as medium shapes and some small shapes. Big, medium, small. It's the recipe for appealing design. Big, medium, and small details. But I digress. By the way, as you mentioned, if you're stuck, don't feel bad because there was certainly a lot of finickiness going on with this donut here, and we're definitely in the steep part of that curve at the moment. Do make use of my Discord if you are stuck. I created it literally so that people can get instantaneous help. I don't have any other benefit for it, so it's there so that you can find help. Link is in the description, and there's like donut help chat room where you can post screenshots of your problem and then people can help each other out. So do make use of that. Now, our shading issue here, this darkened edge, is actually going to fix itself by fixing another issue. So it's a two birds, one stone.
One sec. I gotta get the inside of my donut going here. So just give me a couple seconds here. I'm gonna go full artist here. There we go. Wait, which one was it that looked weird? This one here. There we go. Beautiful.
Solution kind of problem. This 90-degree edge here for this icing, not ideal. Everybody knows that a real icing would create like a rounded edge there, right? So we can fix that just by adding another subsurf modifier. Because you might remember I mentioned, like, yes, if you've got 3 vertices, it'll create like another vertex here, another vertex here, but it'll also like round it out. It'll pull this one back, so you end up with a rounded corner. So right here in your modify stack, we're going to add modify, generate subdivision surface. Now, the order of these does matter. Okay, you want your solidify at the top and the subdivision after it. So Blender works top to bottom, and it's important in this way because you want the extrusion to happen first, and then in order to round that edge, has to happen as a secondary step. So solidify on top, subdivision underneath. Now, whilst we're here and we're looking at the close-up, nice little profile of this edge of this icing, another issue to call it, you can see it's got this this shape that goes around. Yes, so far so good, but then it goes up. And it's like, it would be better if it went around and then tucked in and touched the edge, because that would look more like real liquid would. So we can solve that by just changing one of the settings in the solidify modify. It's not one of those things that you would figure out or know where it is. It's just over time you learn where some of these settings are. But essentially here, the edge data. So we want to change the edge data to say that before you do the solidify step, add a crease on the inner part right here. If we increase this all the way to 1, it now creates a sharpened edge just on that inner part there. So the rest of it is a smoothed edge, but the middle one, there's a crease, so it's making a sharp edge there. And it just gives it just a little bit more realism. Just looks a little bit closer to what you would imagine real icing would do. Okay, now for the cool bit. All right, so if you look at reference to donuts, right, yes, you've got these little wavy bits, but where the icing is really liquidy, it'll often break off from this wave here, and it'll create a trail that goes down underneath the donut, right? It just sort of drips.
One sec, I gotta fix this. Why can't I see?
All the way down. Oops, bumped the microphone. So we can do that, but not.
I'll be right back. Alright, how long have we been at this? 2.5 hours almost. Wow. It's a long time. Oh, hey. Blender Secret Loves is excuse. Sup, bro, to environment art. So far, not a huge fan.
Not the way we were doing it before. If we just took one of these points and then like dragged it all the way down like that, there wouldn't be enough information there, right? You can see you just get this like stretched look and it doesn't look great, okay? So essentially we need to give it more information. And we couldn't just do it by like adding more and more subdivision surfaces. We need to actually like break this shape here and create a new shape that goes down. So we need to extrude. So if I select this vertex and then the one next to it, holding down shift, I don't think I mentioned it, but yeah, if you want to select two things at once, it's shift select. Anyways, so if we select two vertices like that, we want to
I'm kind of lost. Because now I can't see it. Like, I have to go into like a special mode here. And I don't like this. I want to still be able to see the other donut properly. But this is the only way that I can see shit. Ugh, I need a break from the fucking Blender. Just I'm gonna take a break. I think I'm gonna call it here. Blender is a lot. Dealing with Blender for prolonged periods of time is what I'd call a lot of work. So I think I'm gonna call it a day, and I will come back to Blender later. Maybe when I get back. I don't know. All right. Well, thank you to everybody who showed up and chatted and all that. You were all awesome, and I will catch you all later. Ta-ta for now.